Namo Buddhaya. Good evening. Welcome to the Buddha Dharma TV. I am Lisa Chu. Today we begin our program with special chanting from the Dharma Kaya Foundation in Bangkok, Thailand. Response to this chanting is very encouraging. This is the third part. Let's calmly listen to it.
วิรูปักเข
อิเมเมตังเมตังเอราปเทอิเมจัพพยาปุตเตอิเมเมตังเมตังกันหาโคตมะเกอิจาอปาทะเกอิเมเมตังเมตังทิปาทะเกอิเมจตุปะเทอิเมเมตังเมตังปะหุปะเทอิเมมามังอปาทะโกหิงสิมามังหิงสิทิปาทะโกมามังจตุปะโทหิงสิมามังหิงสิปะหุปะโทสัพเพสัตตาสัพเพปานาสัพเพปูตาจะเกวลาสัพเพภัทรานิปัสสันตุมากิงจิปาปมาคมาอัปปมาโนพุทโธอัปปมาโนธัมโมอัปปมาโนสังโฆปมาณวันตานิสิริงสปานิอหิวิชิกาสัทธปฏิอุณหานาภิสรพัวมูสิกากตาเมราคากตาเมปริตาปฏิกมันทุภูตานิโสหังนะโมภะคะวะโตนะโมสัตตานังสัมมาสัมพุทธานัง
อุเทตยัญจักขุมาเอ
เอกราชาหริสวรรณโนปัทวิปภาโสตังตังนามาสามิหริสวรรณังปัทวิปภาสังทยัชกุตตาวิหเรมุทิวสังเยพรหมนาเวทกุสัพปธรรมเมเตเมนะโมเตจมังปารยันตุนามาตุพุทธานังนามาตุโพธิญาณนะโมวิมุตตานังนะโมวิมุตติยาอิมังโสปริทังกตวาโมโรจรติเอสนาอเปตยัญจักขุมาเอกราชาหริสวรรณโนปัทวิปภาโสตังตังนามาสามิหริสวรรณังปัทวิปภาสังตยัจจกุตตาวิหเรมุรัตติงเยพรหมนาเวทกุสัพพธรรมเมเตเมนะโมเตจมังปารยันตุนามาตุพุทธานังนามาตุโพธิญาณนะโมวิมุตตานังนะโมวิมุตติยาอิมังโสปริทังกตวาโมโรวาสมกาปยินติ
วิปัสสิสนมัต
ทุจักขุมันตัสสะสิริมโตสิกิสปินมัตตุสัพพภูตานุกัมปิโนเวสภูสนมัตตุนะหาตกัสสตปัสสิโนนมัตตุกกุสันทัสสมารเสนาปมาทิโนโกนาคมนัสสนมัตตุพรหมนัสสหุสีมโตกัสสปัสสนมัตตุวิปมุตตัสสะสัพพติยังคีรสัสสนมัตตุสักกยปุตตัสสะสิริมโตโยอิมังธัมมมเสเสสิสัพพทุกขาปนุทนังเยจาปินิพุตาโลเกยถาภูตังวิปัสสิสุงเตชนาอภิสุนามหันตาวิตสารธาหิตังเทวมนุสสานังยังนามาสันติโคตมังวิชชาจรณสัมปันนังมหันตังวิตสารทังวิชชาจรณสัมปันนังพุทธังวันธามโคตมันติ
Our upcoming segment highlights the psychological teaching of Venerable Dr. Bhante Punnaji. He will delve into the intricacies of psychology. while persuasively discussing the topic, Thinking Without Tinker. Let us welcome Venerable Dr. Bhante as he graces us with his insights.
So we begin by taking the 5 precepts. Say, Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Adinnadana Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Kamesu Micchachara Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Suramire Majjapamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Well, I'm very happy to see you all this evening, and I hope you'll be interested in what I'm trying to speak about. The topic is thinking without a thinker. That means, although we think, we are not really thinking. thinking is happening to us. That means we are like machines. Now there is a kind of machine called the robot. So in a way we are like that. Because according to even modern scientific thinking, we are organisms in an environment. Organism is like a machine, working according to the same laws of nature. The only difference is that an organism grows from a seed, like a tree growing from a seed, or even an animal growing from a seed. Human beings are also growing from a seed. So you see, but once it has grown up, it becomes an organism. The difference between an organism and an ordinary thing like a cup, if we think of a cup, the cup doesn't have eyes. The cup doesn't have ears. The cup doesn't have a nose. The cup doesn't have a tongue. And the cup doesn't have a feeling of sense of touch. But our body, there are these 5 senses. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body. And these senses react to stimulations by the environment. Light is a movement in the environment, and light, when it comes to the eye, stimulates the eye, and the eye reacts to the stimulus, and that reaction is what we call seeing. The scientific word for that is perception. So in the same way, when some movements in the environment reach the ear, we will again react to that. The ear reacts. It's not the eye doesn't react to sound, but the ear reacts to the sound. So in the same way, the nose smell. That smell is also a disturbance in the environment. It affects the nose. Taste is a similar disturbance. Touch is also disturbance. So we are like machines. there are some machines that we know of. You put a coin and press the button, something comes out. So we are also like that. Sometimes if I use a wrong word, you might react to that and become angry maybe. That is also reaction. So we are just mechanisms. Now, this very important sutra in what is called the Majjhima Nikaya, today translated as the Middle and Saints. There is a book written by Bhikkhu Bodhi. If you take that sutra it's called the Mahatanha Sankaya Sutra. Now that particular sutra, there is a very interesting story where during the time of the Buddha, there was a monk by the name of Sati. This monk by the name of Sati had an opinion that what we call Vijnana, sometimes translated as consciousness, it is something inside the body. And it can even come out of the body and run about and then again come into the body. There are people who say that even in these what are called near-death experiences, the mind comes out of the body and observes the body, and then again re-enters the body. And when people speak of rebirth, sometimes people say this mind that was inside the body goes out and then begins to occupy another body. That is what is called reincarnation. According to the Christians, they believe that when a child is born, God puts a soul into the child. And this soul will go on till the time of death. So that putting the soul into the body is called incarnation. But at the time of death, if the soul comes out of the body, that is called discarnation. So when Buddhists speak about rebirth, they think that discarnate spirit re-enters a body. That is what is called reincarnation. So many Buddhists also think this is a thing like that, reincarnation. The soul comes. They don't call it the soul because the Buddhists say that the Buddha said there is no such thing as a soul. But still they begin to use the word vijnana or consciousness. And that word is used instead of the soul, and the description is also similar to the soul. So this is why at that time, during the time of the Buddha, when this particular monk called Sati was speaking about this vijnana which is inside the body and it can come out and re-enter another body, the Buddha pointed out that that is not correct. That way of thinking is not correct. There is no such thing like that. That's what the Buddha pointed out. So it is very important to read that sutra. The wonderful thing is, if the Buddha denied that there was no such thing, then he should have explained how this thing called rebirth takes place. Because people talk about a thing called rebirth. But in that particular sutra, the Buddha doesn't talk about rebirth. Instead of talking about rebirth, he begins to talk about a thing called ahara. Ahara, the word ahara means taking food or feeding. And he speaks of 4 kinds of ahara. He calls it kabalinkara ahara, mano sanchetana ahara, phassa ahara, and vijnana ahara. These are the Pali words. What he calls kabalinkara ahara is the kind of food that we eat as human beings or even as animals. They also take food. That taking food is the ahara, that is the physical food that we take in. Then mano sanchetana ahara. This is a very interesting term that we should understand. Here the Buddha uses 2 words. One is Mano and the other is Sanchetana. Because it's very important to understand that the Buddha has pointed out that there is no such thing or separate entity like the body which can be called the mind. But he pointed out that what we normally call the mind are three activities of the body. Now we have to distinguish between an entity and an activity. An entity is something that exists. And to exist means to occupy space and time. If we take a table or chair or even a cushion, that occupies space. Occupying space means we can measure the length, the breadth and the height. And that is, if we multiply the length, breadth and height, that is called volume. That volume really means the amount of space occupied by that object. And it also occupies time. That means it has a past, a present and a future. That is the meaning of occupying time. So when we think of the cushion, you find that it can have a volume like that. Then breadth and height, and it has a past, present and future. So when we speak of an entity, we are speaking of something that occupies space and time, an entity. But when we talk about an activity, activity doesn't have a length, breadth and height. It might sometimes appear like that, like for example, when we speak of a flame, what is a flame? Is the flame an entity or an activity? The flame also begins to occupy a certain amount of space, but still it is an activity. Because when the flame goes out, do we speak about where the flame went? If I ask the question, where did the flame go? How would you answer that question? Has it gone anywhere? It hasn't gone anywhere. It was an activity which was what is today called a chemical activity. It's a chemical activity. And that stopped. If the activity can only begin and it can stop. And if we talk about the time, we can only talk about how long the activity was going on. But every fraction of a second, the activity is a new activity. So it's very important to understand the difference between an activity and an entity. Now today we have this modern kind of science which is well known to most people who are educated. It is called quantum physics. And what they are talking about is, the scientists have been talking about a thing called matter and energy. When we speak of matter, we are talking about an entity that occupies space and time. But when we talk about energy, we are talking about an activity. And now, after conducting so many experiments, they have come to the conclusion that there are no real entities in the world. They are all activities. This is a problem. And then when we think of the teachings of the Buddha is saying the same thing. That everything that we speak of is an activity. And the word that the Buddha uses is sankhara. The word sankhara really means an activity. And he spoke about sabbe sankhara anicca. All activities are things that come and go, dependent on conditions. When the conditions are present, the activity begins. When the conditions are absent, it ceases to be. Hetum paticca sambhutam hetu bhanga nirujjati. And this is what the Buddha is trying to point out in this sutra. When he begins to talk about these two things that we normally call the mind. One is, the Buddha used the word mano, and the other word is chitta. Today the modern scientists and psychologists, they have two words to refer to this. They are also aware of this. the thinking part of the mind, thinking, that is called mano. Another part of the mind is emotions, like anger, desires, fears, worries. These are emotions. And the emotions the Buddha called chitta. And the chitta cannot think. Only the mano can think. The mano can form concepts. Chitta can only get excited because it is a movement and it can stop. So when the Buddha used here mano sanchetana ahara, that means for our existence we not only need food, but we are also doing what we call thinking, and we are also having emotions. Now, if we don't have any thinking and if we don't have emotion, we are not really existing. So our existence, what we call our existence, is thinking and emotions. That is called the mano sanchetana ahara. It's not only the physical existence of the body. This is what we call the mental existence, the mind. Then we have what is called phassa ahara. Phassa is commonly translated today as contract. But the real meaning of the word phassa is not contract. Phassa is the formation of concepts. That is called cognition. Phassa really should be translated as cognition. And then Vijnana ahara. The word Vijnana is also translated today as consciousness. But here the word Vijnana is used by the Buddha in two ways. The seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, this is all called Vijnana. Chakku Vijnana means the eye perception. Sota Vijnana is the ear perception. Gana Vijnana is the nose perception. Jivha Vijnana is the tongue perception. Kaya Vijnana is the body perception. That is the activity of the senses. A certain person came once to the Buddha and asked a question, we have these five senses, and each sense provides some information. The eye, when activated, we can see things, but the ear can only hear sounds. So what we see is very different from the sound. What we smell with the nose is another different thing. What we taste is another different thing. And when we touch, we feel the touch. That is also different. Where do these things meet? That was the question. So the Buddha said, Mano. That is where these things meet. Mano.
Look, for it's raining. A lovely hymn by Bee Gees. Its lovely, meaningful, and appealing tones resonate with listeners. Let's indulge in some soul-stirring music by Bee Gees. very often, and they are mostly worldly. Here is Dr. Bhikkhu Bodhi from the USA to talk about the 5 dreams of the Bodhisattva to bless all of us.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, so we are continuing now, and I'm going to increase the size. How is the point size?
It's good, Bhante. It's good.
People here, and can you see all right? Okay. Okay, so now we're continuing with our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Fives. And we're drawing pretty close to the end of this collection. And this is a sutta that I thought had some points of interest in it. It is titled Dreams. And here the Buddha is speaking, and he says, but in his usual way, he refers to himself, as he often does, in the third person, as though it were another person. So he says, before his enlightenment, while he was just a bodhisattva, not fully enlightened, 5 great dreams appeared to the Tathagata. So we know the Tathagata is a designation of the Buddha, translated sometimes thus come or thus gone. The Arahat, that's the worthy one, the perfectly or fully enlightened one. So what are the 5? Okay, so before his enlightenment, we could skip the stock portion, he had the dream that the mighty earth was his bedstead, and the Himalayas, the king of mountains, was his pillow. His left hand rested on the eastern sea, his right hand on the western sea. I guess this would be, the eastern sea would be the Bay of Bengal, the western sea would be the Arabian Sea, and his 2 feet on the southern sea, the south of India. Okay, so first we go through the sutta, then I'll sort of explore some of the implications or problems. Okay, so this is the first dream that appeared to the Buddha before his enlightenment. Okay, then the second dream, he had the dream that a kind of grass called tirya rose up from his navel and stood touching the sky. Okay, the third dream, he had the dream that white worms with black heads crawled from his feet up to his knees and covered them. Maybe not such a pleasant visual image. Okay, then the fourth dream is that 4 birds of different colors came from the 4 directions, fell at his feet, and turned all white. Then the 5th dream is that he climbed up a huge mountain of dung without being soiled by it. So that was the 5th dream that appeared to the Tathagata, to the Buddha, before his enlightenment, and that's the important point, while he was still in the stage of a bodhisattva. And I think, if I remember, according to the commentary, this was a dream that occurred to him the night before he made that determination the next day to strive without interruption for the supreme enlightenment. Okay, so now he's going to give the explanation of these dreams. Okay, so when he had the dream that this mighty earth was his bed and the Himalayan mountains were his pillow and so on, so this was a foretoken or a sign that he would awaken to the supreme perfect enlightenment. I guess my thought would be that attaining the supreme enlightenment means that one has reached the highest position possible in the world. So in that way, I would guess that one makes the entire earth one's bed. Because according to the Buddhist tradition, there are two beings, or two people in the human realm who occupy positions of supremacy. So one on the mundane side of the picture is the one called the Chakravarti Raja, the wheel-turning monarch, the one who is supposed to unite all the 4 continents under one system of rule and become a world ruler, a universal emperor, who rules the world not through force and violence. Perfect example of mindfulness. Lack of mindfulness. Okay, leave it there. Okay. Who rules the world not through force and violence, but rules on the basis of Dhamma, in the mundane sense of righteousness, virtue, goodness, generosity, kindness, compassion, and so on. So on the mundane side of the picture, the supreme person is the wheel-turning monarch. And in the spiritual realm, the supreme person is, of course, the fully enlightened Buddha. And so it seems here that when the Buddha has said that he makes the mighty earth his bed, that shows that he reaches the position of supremacy, and not just in the mundane domain, but in the spiritual domain. Okay, then when he had the dream that this kind of grass, Tirya grass, rose up from his navel and stood touching the sky, this was a foretoken that he would awaken to or discover the Noble Eightfold Path and would proclaim it widely throughout the world, especially to devas, to deities, and human beings. Yeah, I'm not quite sure why the grass, maybe we could explore why this grass coming up from the navel should signify the discovery of the Noble Eightfold Path. Or maybe just as a speculation, maybe because the Noble Eightfold Path emerges through his own realization, so that is coming up from the navel, and then when it stands touching the sky, maybe indicates or suggests that he proclaims it, well, touching the sky to the devas, and as it's growing up from the navel, it passes through the lower dimensions of the atmosphere, which is covering the human realm. Okay, then we have the third great dream, and that is that white worms with black heads crawl from his feet up to his knees and cover them. So this is a foretoken that many white-robed householders would go for refuge to the Tathagata, to the Buddha, for as long as life lasts. And so they're white worms because especially in the Theravada tradition, it is the custom when lay people go to the monastery for religious events, to take the 8 precepts, to go on meditation retreats, they'll wear white clothes. In India, a white sarong, a kind of skirt, and then an upper robe of white. And also, even in a country like Sri Lanka, there are householders who observe the 8 precepts, which include celibacy, on a full-time basis. And they sort of distinguish themselves by wearing the white clothes all the time. So they're sort of like, maybe like full-time celibates, almost like monks, but without formal monastic ordination. Why they have black heads, I just don't know. Maybe we could see if anybody has any ideas about that. Okay, then when we have the fourth dream, so here we have 4 birds of different colors come from each of the directions, fall at the Buddha's feet, and turn all white. So this is a sign that members of the 4 classes, or actually the 4 castes, 4 main castes, and then they're enumerated here. I'll come back to them, that the members of the 4 castes or classes would go forth from the household life into homelessness in the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, and attain the unsurpassed liberation. And so the 4 castes are in Pali it's Khatiyas, but in Sanskrit, Kshatriya. So this is the ruling administrative class, including the upper echelons of the warriors. And then the Brahmins, the priestly caste, those who are charged with the preservation and transmission of the Vedas, who perform in Indian culture the general religious rituals connected with the events of ordinary life, birth, rituals for birth, marriage, blessing ceremonies of various kinds. So Kshatriyas, Brahmins, the Vaishyas or Vaishyas, these are the merchants and the agricultural class, landowners, business people. And then the Shudras, or in Pali Sudras, these are the laborers, the menials, servants, laborers. And also outside the 4-fold caste system are the classes of people that are classified as outcasts, those that don't fit into the caste system. But also, though they're not mentioned here, but there are instances where they go forth and become ordained as, cases where they're ordained as monks, perhaps some as nuns, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, and also attain unsurpassed liberation. Okay, so this is the 4th great dream. And just a further note, you see, within the Brahminical systems, the Brahmins, when they arrange the 4 social castes, they have the Brahmins at the top, Kshatriyas under them, then the Vaishyas and the Shudras. But the Buddha is from the Kshatriya class. So when he presents the 4 castes, he puts the Kshatriyas at the top and the Brahmins beneath them. Okay, then the 5th dream is the dream that he climbs a mountain of dung without being soiled by it. And so this is a foretoken that he will receive. These are the 4 requisites: robes, alms food, dwelling places, and medicinal requisites. So in a way, these things are represented or symbolized by the dung, and yet he uses them without being tied to them by attachment, not infatuated with them, or blindly absorbed in them, seeing the danger and knowing the escape. Now, I guess you see, the thing is that for monastics, because we don't have access to other types of sensual pleasures, like worldly sensual pleasures, so the mind can develop a kind of infatuation, craving, strong attachment, maybe particularly to robes and alms food, maybe to dwellings too, but maybe the strongest source of sensual craving will be alms food. So you're not getting particularly sexual enjoyment, so the mind has to be seeking some kind of sensory pleasure. And so that craving gets often transferred to alms food. So wanting to enjoy different varieties of flavor, different varieties of taste, different styles of cuisine. And yeah, that can become a strong obsession, even to overpower the mind. So, you know, if you're not careful, you're just thinking, what am I going to get for the alms meal today or tomorrow or the day after? And even though these robes seem so so ordinary, bland, uniform, but you know, we develop attachment to particular colors, just like worldly people develop attachment to, you know, the changing fashions of autumn fashion, then it'll be the winter fashion, spring fashion, summer fashions. And so there are different colors of robes. The style is pretty much all the same of the cut of the robe, but there are different styles of wearing the robe. And I used to see in Sri Lanka, you know, when we go out, there's a way of wearing the robe, rolling it over one shoulder. But I saw in the late 1980s, a kind of style of the younger monks wearing the robe. I have to say, I'm sorry to say this, but it seemed a little bit sexy. It was a way, like, I can imagine, like, maybe they're trying to imitate in monastic robe style, like the British of the mod generation of in Britain of clothing that the mod generation was wearing. So they turned this into a style of wearing the robe so that the roll would not come over here, over the shoulder. It would come over the bicep in a particular way. So it looks like you're being really like tough. You know, not a feeble, quiet, withdrawn, simple little monk coming out from the forest, but I'm a tough monk with my robe over the bicep. Okay, so the Buddha uses these 4 requisites without being tied to them, without being attached to them. Okay, so these are the 5 great dreams that appeared to the Tathagata, to the Buddha, before his enlightenment, while he was a bodhisattva, not fully enlightened. Okay, now the reason I chose a sutta, the dreams themselves, I mean, they're interesting, but maybe in themselves they don't provide that much food for discussion. But what struck me of interest is that the fact that the Buddha has these dreams, it says before his enlightenment, while he was still a bodhisattva, not yet enlightened, and yet the dreams... Is that somebody online? Yep. Please, you could mute your microphone, people online, except when you have occasion to speak. Okay, so these dreams occur before his enlightenment, and what they all clearly show is that his attainment of, first, that his attainment of enlightenment is ensured. That's the first thing that they show. And the second thing that they show is that not only will he attain the enlightenment for himself, but that he is going to become a teacher, that he is going to teach the Dhamma to the world, even to the extent that he has many lay people becoming his disciples for life, and many people from the 4 social castes of contemporary India going forth and becoming his monastic disciples, and that as a spiritual teacher, he's going to receive these abundant offerings. And I read this passage in connection to another famous passage that occurs in the suttas, and I want to get that passage. Okay, let me blow this up. Do you see the file that says from Majjhima Nikaya number 26?
Yes, Bhante.
Yeah, I'm trying to increase the size of this. Okay, is this better?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, so first, like it seems to me that there are at least 2 ways of looking at the life of the Buddha. One I will call a traditional canonical view, and then the other is a view that might be taken by, let's say, secular, non-religious, academic scholars. So if we take the standpoint of the secular academic scholar, we see the Buddha, of course, as a historical person. He is striving for a state considered enlightenment, liberation, and it's uncertain whether he is going to attain it or not. So that is one point of view. And so it is really purely the product of maybe his intelligence, his striving, his exertion. So when he sits down at the foot of the Bodhi tree, from this perspective, it's like a 50-50 chance, or at least it's just, maybe you can say 50-50, but it's a flip of a coin in some way. Maybe the coin is weighted a little bit more in one direction than the other, but his attainment of enlightenment is just an event that occurs through his striving, but it's not in any way preordained or predetermined. So it's possible that he could have missed it entirely, and then history would have rolled on without a Buddha, or at least without excuse me, without Gautama of the Sakyan clan becoming a Buddha. There would have been maybe others who claimed to be Buddhas, but not Gautama, our Buddha. Gautama would not have been the Buddha. He would have just been striving, and he could have failed. And then maybe he spent the rest of his life as an ascetic, passed away without attaining enlightenment. Or maybe he could have just given up his striving and returned to his life in the palace of Kapilavatthu and become the prince or even the ruler of the Sakyans. So that's one way to look at it from a purely secular, sort of critical academic point of view. The other point of view is sort of the traditional Buddhist view, is that the Buddha had practiced the paramitas for countless lifetimes, and even though he had to strive and struggle to attain enlightenment, but it was already sort of predetermined that he would succeed. And we find some support for this later position Okay, so I took this passage, maybe this is the primary canonical source for that, at least one of the primary canonical sources for this traditional point of view. So this is in the Sutta Nipata, it's the Nalaka Sutta. I think it's in the Sutta Nipata, I believe it's... I believe it's chapter 3, Sutta number 12. Okay, so in this sutta, at the beginning of the sutta, there is a sage by the name of Asita who's meditating in the mountains, and he has a celestial vision, and he sees the devas, the deities, dancing and singing in the sky. And then he asks them why they're so joyful. And then they say that in Lumbini, in the Sakyan country, the Bodhisattva has been born into the world for the well-being and happiness. And that's why we're so delighted. He is the best of all beings, the foremost person. He will turn the wheel, that's the wheel of Dhamma, in the grove named for the rishis. That is referring to Isipatana, the grove of the rishis. And then roaring like a lion, the Lord of beasts. Okay, then when Asita hears this, then he descends from the mountain and he goes to the Sakyan capital of Kapilavatthu, and he goes to the residence of Suddhodana, the future Buddha's father, and then he speaks to the Sakyans and says, "Where is the prince? I want to see him." And then the Sakyans show him the newborn baby. Yeah, people are talking, please mute yourself. Right. Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, so Asita says, I want to see the baby. So the Sakyans show him the baby. And first, Asita is very happy, very joyful. And then Asita becomes sorrowful and starts, maybe he's even weeping. And then the Sakyans see him weeping and say, "Why are you weeping? Do you foresee some danger that lies ahead for this newborn baby? Maybe he's going to die in childhood, meet with some disaster." And then Asita says, "I don't see any harm for the prince, so be at ease. But the prince will reach the foremost enlightenment, and out of compassion for many people, he will set in motion the wheel of the Dhamma, and his spiritual life will become widespread. But the remainder of my life is not long. And so I will die in a short while, and I will not get to hear his Dhamma. So that's why I am distressed and dejected." Yeah, so the important point here in relation to these two perspectives is that this passage shows the traditional canonical perspective that even when he was a baby, his future destiny was assured, that he was going to attain the foremost enlightenment. And so he goes through this struggle. He goes through this period of living in the palace, getting married, having a son, then having to become aware of the sufferings of the world, renounce the world, undertake the ascetic practices, strive diligently. Like all of this is necessary preparation for becoming a Buddha. But from the canonical perspective, it's already assured that he's going to attain the supreme enlightenment, not only for his own realization, but as this text says, whoops, no, I've lost it. Sorry, I lost the expanded version. Yeah, as this text says, that he has been born into the human world for the well-being and happiness of the world, that he's going to turn the wheel of Dharma. He's so not only enlightened for himself, but he's going to teach for others. And yeah, out of compassion for many people, he will set in motion the wheel of Dharma so that his spiritual life will become widespread. So even at his birth, there's a prediction, definitive prediction, that he'll attain enlightenment for himself and that he's going to become this world teacher who teaches the Dhamma for the welfare of many. And then, of course, there is another sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya that probably most of us are familiar with, or at least we're familiar with the story, where, and this, of course, clearly has the legendary features to it, when the baby is born, as soon as he's born, as soon as he comes out from the mother's womb, he's received by gods and bathed by gods, and then he's set on the ground, and lotus flowers spring up from the ground, and then he takes 7 steps, and then he holds one hand up to the sky, one hand down to the earth, and says, in this heaven above, between the heaven above and the earth below, I am the world honored one. This is my last birth. I will become the supremely enlightened one. Okay, but then sort of in contrast with this, there is another passage. So this is in the Majjhima Nikaya, and this takes place in the vicinity of the Bodhi tree right after the Buddha has attained the enlightenment. And then he reflects back on the Dhamma that he has realized, and he considers that this Dhamma that I've attained is profound, hard to see, and so on. But this population, people in the world delight in worldly enjoyments, take delight in worldly enjoyments. It'll be hard for them to see this truth, and especially the truth of dependent origination and the truth of cessation or nibbana. Then he thinks, if I were to teach the Dhamma, others wouldn't understand me, and that would be wearisome for me, troublesome for me. And then reflecting in this way, he says, my mind inclined to inaction, that is, to just living quietly and peacefully in the forest, rather than to teaching the Dhamma. And I've seen some scholars argue that this passage shows that there was a real possibility that the Buddha would have attained enlightenment for himself, but wouldn't have fulfilled the second aspect that I mentioned of teaching the Dhamma to the world. So he could have become an enlightened one, but not the world teacher. And so they say, this is the sort of historically or critically inclined scholars, that this shows like the real reflections going on in the mind of the Buddha, that he was really disinclined to teach, reluctant to teach. So that is the hard historical truth, reality. And then they would say, well, he might have considered further and then decided out of compassion to go out and teach. But the way it's put in the text is that this high deity from the Brahma world named Brahma Sahampati is sort of looking down at what's taking place at the foot of the Bodhi tree and realizes that now the enlightened one is now thinking of not teaching the Dhamma.
That concludes today's broadcast. If you have any concerns or questions, please do not hesitate to contact us at info@buddhadharmatv.com. Thank you for watching, and we're confident that our program on Buddha Dharma TV will inspire peace lovers around the world. Good night. Namo Buddhaya.